or anything. All right, so today's class we're going to talk about garden pests, diseases, and weeds. So kind of throwing all three of them there together, because we'll go through and talk about different pests and different diseases and different types of weeds, and we'll talk about certain types of treatments. Specific treatments, but for the most part, we're going to be talking about like kind of general holistic ways to deal with all three of these things. Ideally, like just getting your garden as healthy as possible. Getting healthy circulation, planting the right plants, spacing, thinning, all these different things. Planting native plants, flowering. Tracking, creating ecosystems. That's ultimately going to help you with like 90% of the pests and diseases and weeds and things that you're going to be dealing with if you can create that healthy ecosystem. And then we'll talk about different ways to kind of treat specific things as well. But we'll go ahead and kind of jump right into it. So garden, yeah, we're going to first talk about pests, diseases, and weeds. As for the pests, we're mainly going to be talking about insect pests. The next class, I believe that's the next class on the list, we'll be talking about or it might be in somewhere real soon. I think if it's not in the next class, it's at least in the next class or two. We're going to be talking about mammal pests, like the squirrels and the rats and the birds and deers and things like that. So we'll have a whole class focused on how to deal with all those kind of animals. But today we're just going to talk about insects and how to deal with our insects. So there's a big list of insects right now, and we're not going to cover everything that you're going to see, but we're mainly going to cover the things that we see in our gardens, most common pests and diseases and things. But yeah, so we're going to talk. So the first part, so we kind of broke our the insects and the bad pests between seasons. There tends to be a bunch of different insects that come out in spring and some that come out in the summer. And these, these spring ones, they may stick around for a long time, especially if it's a mild summer. But we start seeing them emerge, around April and May. So right about now, you should start seeing some of these guys popping up. If not now, pretty soon. Definitely depending on um, depending on what kind of crops you're producing. And it's just a second. I'm gonna try to. I'm working on. Okay, so yeah, it was. There's a video. It keeps on popping up. All right, I got that. So here's just a broad, these are very common ones that you'll see in the spring that are going to start emerging. And you might start seeing some of the first things, you might see them as flies as they land and start laying eggs. And then, in the next couple of weeks, you'll start seeing that the larvae and the worms and stuff emerging. And particularly one that you might start seeing real soon are cabbage loopers. So these are these little white flies. If you do see like a white fly like this right about now, definitely spend the next hour, stalking that white fly and killing them, because he's a cabbage looper fly. So he's the size of maybe he's a small fly. I mean you'll be able to see him really well, but definitely like maybe like a pinky finger tip. He's a small one. But what he does, I mean, he'll lay eggs. They particularly like brassicas, a lot of like the collards and cabbages and things like that, and the kales. And they lay these eggs. You'll see a lot of them. You'll see these little tiny white eggs, underneath the bottom of the leaves, and then it'll start sprouting these little cabbage loopers. And these all, if you've grown brassica, especially in the springs, like if you've grown a lot of cabbage and collards and stuff, you're definitely familiar with these guys. They do a lot of damage. So it's a big deal, kind of. But I mean, some of the ways to kind of deal with them is just like it's a good idea to spend at least if you're going out and watering your garden once a day, spend like 5 minutes just walking through your garden, looking them on the undersides of the leaves, and trying and then just spending some time just squishing them. A lot of hand squishing. If you're squeamish, you can get like a little bowl of soapy water and knock them into that stuff. But that's like some of the best things for these guys. If you can catch them with their eggs early, that's great. But you'll see. I mean, these you'll see them pretty well. Like I said, they like to hang out on the underside of like big collard and brassica leaves. They'll sometimes hang out in like the crevices at the bottom of the plants and things. But you'll see them in a pretty easy squish. You just kind of, especially during the spring, you need to spend a decent amount of time squishing some bugs. Other ones that you might see, this crazy looking pattern. This is a leaf miner. So this is actually like a bug that gets inside, in between the layers of a leaf, and they just start mining. They eat all the chlorophyll inside the leaf. So it doesn't really do a whole lot of damage. It's not going to kill the plant, but it may, stunt the growth a little bit if it gets too bad. So what you could do with these guys, with leaf miners, you could just cut them right out. When you see that pattern, just cut it out and throw it in the trash. Unless you have a really hot compost pile, you don't want to just throw them. If it's a lukewarm compost pile, a lot of these bugs and diseases may survive, and then you just putting them right back into your garden. Um, if you show up one day and your leaves look like they've been shot by a shotgun, I actually labeled this wrong. This is not a leaf miner. I'm sorry. I'll fix this. These are flea beetles. Flea beetles are basically, they're super small fleas. They're real hard to see. You're not going to be able to squish them by hand. They basically, appear. They really like eggplants. That's one of the reasons why if you're planting eggplants, you want to don't plant a small eggplant. You try to if you're growing them yourself, try to grow them as big as possible before planting them outside, or if you're buying an eggplant seedling, look for like the biggest eggplant seedling, because a lot of times, I mean, these flea beetles, they won't kill your plants. They'll just kind of stunt them a little bit, and a lot of times they'll go away, eventually, and then the plant, as long as it's a healthy, happy, like if it's a healthy, nice size, seedling, they'll survive the flea beetles. And if you're worried about it, one way to treat them, you can actually spray it with some neem oil. Neem oil is this organic spray. It's made from a neem tree. You want to make sure it's like 100% neem oil, because sometimes they cut it with some pretty harsh pesticides and herbicides. Just spraying that, and that will take care. If you're worried about them, that will take care of them, and they'll go away after the application of neem oil. And then a couple easier bugs that handle aphids. Aphids are everywhere. They're really easy to take care of. You can squish them. You can spray them with like a heavy, high pressured hose. A lot of times, just creating the ecosystems where you can attract like things like ladybugs. Ladybugs love eating these guys. So if you can get a couple ladybugs in your garden, I mean, they'll take care of these aphids for you. So they're pretty easy. Like, they're sap suckers. So a lot of times you'll see like shiny parts on leaves. That's because they suck up the sugars in the leaf, and then they poop out this sugary dew. And it kind of, it'll make the leaf a little shiny. Aphids, there's all different kinds of aphids. They're different colors. There's even ones called like woolly aphids that look like it's just a bunch of fuzz on your plant, but it's actually aphids that are just really fuzzy. They're white fuzzy. So just all different kinds, but they're really easy to take care of. And the last one you might see, especially if you're mulching, which we really encourage you to mulch, is you might start seeing some slugs. So these guys are you'll more mainly see them. You'll see big chunks of leaves that are just like chewed on, that are just big pieces that are missing out. Because there's with insects, there's bugs that chew things and can bite things, and then bugs that like suck the saps out of things. That, depending on, like if you see, like discolorations in leaves, that might be a bug that's sucking something. But then if you see big chunks of leaves, chewed on, that might be a slug. And slugs, and snails and stuff, they're really easy to take care of. Come out in the middle of the night with a headlamp and just squish them. Or if you want during the day, put like a big flat rock in the middle of the garden, and on a hot day they'll all travel and hang out underneath that rock, and then just flip it over and squish them. Or if you don't like squishing things, those beer traps work really well. They really like the sugars and stuff in beer. Put a little dish of beer, and they'll come in, they'll start drinking it, and they'll fall in and drown. These are mainly the bugs that are going to come out in the spring, but again, they may last a while, especially like leaf miners will stick around a while. Depending on, I mean, they like certain crops, in the spring. So if you grow these crops, longer, they'll stick around. But then there's another set of bugs that are going to start emerging more like May, June, July. So these are more of your summer, your bugs that really enjoy your summer crops. So again, there's just typical things that we can do. We'll talk about this later, just like how to build a holistic health of your garden and the ecosystem, and how to attract, beneficial insects to eat these guys, so you don't have to deal with them. but there's all little tips on for each one of them. So like the Japanese beetle, really like Japanese beetles don't really. I've never really seen them bother vegetable gardens. They mainly attack my fruit trees. They'll like start chewing on the leaves and they'll defoliate the leaves, which we'll talk more about in the fruit tree class. But there's a clay spray called kaolin clay that you can spray if you start noticing your fruit trees are getting defoliated. You can spray that there. It's like this clay-based organic spray. It looks like it just covers everything in like a mildew, a powder, like powdered sugar or something. And the bugs just hate it. Like they won't even like step on it. So they'll just avoid your trees if you do that. So we'll talk more about that spray later. But a lot of times when you're digging in the soil and you see these big white grubs, there's only like 2 or 3 big white grubs out there, and most of them in this area are Japanese beetles. So if you see those and you dig them up, squish them or throw them in the yard and let some birds eat them. Yeah, definitely white grubs in the ground are typically not very good. And then like these guys are the worst, the cucumber beetles. So they look like, nice little ladybugs, but they're yellow. Remember ladybugs? There's a lot of things that look like ladybugs, but they're different colors. Like there's like a Colorado beetle, potato beetle that's like brown. There's like a Mexican bean beetle thing. So all these things that kind of look like ladybugs, but but how you can tell is ladybugs are only red. So if they're red, don't squish them. If they're any other color, get them. Especially the cucumber beetles, because these guys, they don't do much damage. They'll just bite a little bit out of like cucurbits and mainly cucumbers and things like that. But they have this disease in their stomach, this bacterial welt that they can, if you ever have a healthy cucumber plant and all of a sudden, 2 days later it's completely dead, that's usually because of this bacterial welt in their stomach. So that they often transmit this disease to your cucumbers. So if you do see these cucumber beetles out, definitely again like spend some time stalking them and killing them, because they're real hard to control. Especially like if you have a problem. I mean, you can use row covers as like your cucumbers and stuff are small. You can protect them by having like pest cloths that we'll talk about later. But for the most part, it's hard. I mean, you just got to keep an eye out for these guys and squish them when you see them. I mean, they're not. I mean, they'll fly around, jump around, but I mean, you could definitely get them if you spend some time. And also looking at for eggs, they have unique little egg clusters on the bottom side of the cucumber leaves and different cucurbit leaves. So other ones, harlequin beetles are pretty awful. They just recently have come north, with the climate change and things warming up. So they came, maybe like I was like 5 years ago. They were really awful the first couple of years. A lot of people were worried about that they were going to devastate our fruit industries, our fruit orchards, and since then they've kind of died back a little bit. They're still an issue, but it's at least it doesn't seem like. I mean, I remember the first year or two, we would just spend hours every day just going around gardens and squishing these bugs. But now, I mean, I don't see them too often, but they're still definitely around. It's really important if you can catch these bugs early. If you look on the underside of different leaves, you'll see their eggs. Their eggs look like striped kegs, like little like cylinder keg things that they're really symmetrical when they're lined up. And if you can get to the eggs early, that will make your life so much easier. But then if they do bounce around, you can squish them really easily. You can get some soapy water and knock them into the soapy water. They're not that hard to kill. The white flies. So if you ever look at, it looks like there's like powdery mildew, which we'll talk about later. It just looks like this mildew, but when you touch the leaf, you have flies fly everywhere. So that's white flies. They typically don't do a whole lot of damage, but they can stunt, the growth a little bit. So these are really easy to take care of. You can just spray them with a high power hose. If they become a problem, you could just spray some neem oil, and that should take care of them. Tomato hornworms. So these are big, giant green, worms that will like devastate a tomato plant really quickly. But they're also really slow, easy to kill. A lot of times, I'll show you a picture later. A parasitic wasp will lay eggs in them. So if you see like these white eggs, attached to them, don't, squish them, leave them, because they'll be dead in a day, and the eggs will hatch and eat their insides and then fly out. A bunch of parasitic wasps will fly out and then kill more tomato hornworms. So definitely don't squish these guys if you see eggs. I'll show a picture of what that looks like later. later. Squash bug is very similar to hardworking beetle. You see a lot of them in squashes. If you can find their eggs early, these little like bright orange, eggs, it's great. If not, squishing them and knocking them in soapy water. Squash vine borer, we're gonna have a whole slide on that. Really awful guy. If you ever have a huge section of some kind of squash plant just die off, check the base and you see some holes in there. It's because a little maggot guy is crawled in. And like cucurbits and squashes, they have hollow branches, so they'll just go in there and just start eating everything inside that branch. So you have to actually like get a sharp knife and cut it open so you can find them, squish them, and then bury the wound in some like wet soil, and hopefully all that will like grow a root ball. But there's a good chance you're going to kill your plant while you're doing it. But you have to do that because they're going to kill the plant regardless. So it's a tough thing. If I'll talk a little bit more about that. Some prevention for squash borers if you have them. One question: a way to track the cabbage fly, like fly paper. That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, like if you hung up like sticky fly paper that are different colors will attract different flies. That's a good question. I would be interested if you want to try that out, and if you actually get some of these. I imagine you might get other insects as well, but I would be interested to see how that would work on that fly paper. We'll talk about a little bit other things to do with those cabbage loopers as well when we get to like sprays and stuff. Yeah, so treatments. So we talked a lot about this, specific treatments, but mainly like general treatments. Again, just getting the habit of doing pest walk, at least twice a week, but if not, like every day. When you're watering, as you're watering your plants, look on the underside of the leaves, especially in the early, when a lot of these plants are smaller, in the spring and the summer before, you get these giant cucumber plants, check. Just look through the plants, check, try to find some bad bugs and squish them. Definitely spend some time doing that. Soapy water if you don't like squishing them. Checking the crevices, check underneath the leaves. But then there's general sprays as well that you can use. We talked a little bit about neem oil. Neem oil is a really fantastic organic spray. You just want to make sure it's 100% organic. It's not cut with some harsher pesticides and herbicides. But that's really great stuff for it's just a wide variety of insects, from white flies, aphids, a lot of things that have softer skins. It will if not kill them, it will at least they hate the smell of it and stuff. They'll at least stay away from plants that you spray. So that work, neem works really good. BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, I think, if I'm pronouncing that right. So BT is really great for cabbage loopers. So it's this bacteria, it's beneficial bacteria that you can spray on these cabbage loopers, and they'll actually end up like killing them. The bacteria will eat them and kill them, and it's very specific to just caterpillars. So it's not so if you're worried about killing like ladybugs and beneficial insects, BT is a really fantastic one that would just kill caterpillars, which mainly if you're spraying them on your brassicas, you're just taking away these cabbage loopers. Kaolin spray. So this is that organic spray, that clay-based spray. So this is my favorite spray overall. Like it doesn't really kill anything, but it's like if I notice that my plants are being chewed on and I don't know what's doing it, I can't find eggs, or I can't find these bugs, and I just don't know what's going on. I'll get some of this kaolin spray. I'll spray the whole plant. Just covers it in this it looks like it's like covered in powder sugar. It allows sunlight to still get in. It doesn't block sunlight. It's organic. You can eat it if you want, but it washes off really quickly when you harvest the fruit. And bugs hate it. So anytime a bug will land on it, they hate landing on it. This is like 100%. If I don't know what's happening, I can't figure it out, I'll go ahead and spray my plant. I use this a lot in fruit trees, but I have used it on some veggie plants, and whatever is like attacking this thing is going to stay away from that. You can get kaolin spray. I know like Edible Landscaping sells it. It's a nursery in Virginia. Some garden stores are starting to sell it. You can usually order it online, and it's really cheap. You can get a lot of it for like $20, $30. And then there's a lot of DIY sprays. We'll show some recipes later, but like different garlic sprays. Garlic is like a natural fungicide and a pesticide, so won't kill things, but it will definitely keep pests away. I mean, they hate the smell of garlic. Hot pepper sprays, baking soda, sprays and tomato sprays that are different like kinds of fungicides. It's just whenever you do a DIY sprays, there's lots of recipes online. You just want to, when you mix it, spray a little bit of your plant first, and then like maybe wait, some couple hours or half a day or a day, just to see if you didn't mix anything that's going to like actually hurt the plant. And then if your plant looks fine, feel free to spray the rest of it. And then just high pressure water sprays, get some kind of nozzle that has a high pressure spray. Normally you don't want to ever spray high pressure water. You don't want water because you don't want to erode your soil and wash away, things. But having that option just to spread away a lot of like, white flies and aphids and things like that is really great way to deal with a lot of bugs. And then the other ones, like just attracting beneficial bugs. We're going to talk more about this, but just like, dedicating a quarter of your garden at least to like native, herbs and flowers and things that are going to have nectar sources. Because a lot of times, I mean, you can like, like you can buy ladybugs. It's really cool. Like you can buy this, like, for like maybe $15, you can buy like 500 of them in this little container full of sawdust. And it's a really fun activity with kids to like, kind of like, you're supposed to wait till like, the sun, is going down and not quite dark. And then you can spread them all over your garden and they'll eat all the aphids and all different kinds of bugs in the area. But then once they're done with the aphids, if you don't have like these perennial and annual like native flowers and herbs that actually have nectar, because they love nectar too. If you don't have any nectar sources, they're just going to get up and fly away and go to some place that does have nectar sources. So it's just like a waste of $20 if you don't actually have plants to sustain them. And we'll talk about all different types of plants that work really well to keep beneficial insects. And then a last thing, like, traps, like you can do beer traps for the slugs. You could do trap crops too. Trap crops are just crops that you don't really like, that, pests like, and then you plant them on the outs, kind of the edges of your garden. And as it attracts all these insects, it will keep, hopefully, the idea is that you keep them away from your good vegetables, or just make it like a kill zone that you can squish them. I know like sunflowers, work really great with harlequin beetles. Like whenever I plant those massive mammoth sunflower seeds, eventually all of my harlequin beetles just like go towards it for some reason, and it just makes it super easy to kill them. Cool. Let's see. So what are some good pest crops? Yeah, like I said, like sunflowers. I don't know a whole lot about pest crops, and you want to be careful too, because you don't want to get like you could be attracting more insects to your area. But definitely, yeah, research. If you want to try some pest crops, do some research first beforehand. To find out good ones that are working in specifically for the bugs that you're experiencing. Then sprayers. So, we talked more previously about different sprayers, but like if you're just spraying a small area, these hand sprayers are great. If you want to have a solution that's going to mix with your hose, you can get these things. But then like if you're spraying more than just a small area, like you want to think about getting one of these two sprayers. There's a hand pump sprayer. It's like maybe like $20-$30 at Home Depot, and then for like maybe, I don't know, $40-$50-$60, you can get a backpack sprayer. So if you're doing like, if you have fruit trees or a large, garden, you might want a backpack sprayer, as opposed to if you just got a couple raised beds, this is going to do fine. And then squishing, so we talked about squash borers a little bit. So this is what the fly looks like. He lands in spring, puts his eggs in the ground. They hatch, and then the larvae crawl into the squash, the hollow squash branches, and just start eating it away. And you can tell like right away, like it'll be a huge section of squash plants that will just like die off. So if you see that, always check the base. If you see like a hole, or if you see like more than one hole, if you see 3 holes, that means you have 3 of these guys in there crawling upward. So you just get like a really sharp knife, like a box cutter, and just start opening this up very carefully until you find them. All the, hopefully it's just one, but it might be more 2 or 3. Squish them all, and then bury them in wet soil with the hope of like, it will turn into a root ball. Sometimes I do have have to warn you, sometimes plants don't survive this process, but they're going to die anyways. So you definitely want to try something. And if you know you have squash borers, you can think about different ways to prevent them. Like if you have them bad, last year, they might be coming back this year. So you can get some row covers. We'll talk about pest covers in a second, to cover your squash seedlings before they get too big, just to keep the flies from laying their eggs. Or I know some people will wrap aluminum foil around the bases of the squash plant, and that will keep these guys from actually digging into the squash plant. So I've heard mixed results with aluminum foil. Sometimes, it can work, but it's not like a foolproof thing. Then prevention. So this is really cool. I love this picture because so aphids, these are aphids. So we talked about aphids will suck the sugars out of the plant, and then they'll poop this sugar water. And a lot of times ladybugs will actually farm them, will actually herd them as like cattle. They'll raise them up and they'll keep them, and then they'll actually they'll walk around and actually drink the sugar water as it's coming out of the aphids. And then in turn, they'll also protect the or not ladybug, I'm sorry, the ants. Ants will do that. Ants will actually will harvest these aphids, and they'll for the sugar waters. And then in turn, they'll actually protect these aphids against ladybugs. So it's a whole crazy world of bugs happening out there, like with ant farmers and ladybugs and all that stuff. So it's a pretty cool little bug world. So the biggest, just a preventive approach, we talked a lot about, you could try to treat every little thing, but it's going to be too much sometimes. And so a lot of this is just kind of focusing on your holistic health, like trying to make as healthiest a garden as possible. Because a lot of these, the pests and diseases really focus on weak plants. Like that will be the vector. They'll be introduced. You'll have some weak plant, maybe something that bolted and you haven't taken care of. It's just not doing too well, and that's where the diseases and pests will come, and then from there they'll spread around your garden. But if you just create this whole healthy garden and create this healthy ecosystem, that's really your best prevention when dealing with pests and diseases. So some things, just little practices like making sure water the soil, not your plant. I mean, when you spray water all over your plants, especially at night, if it doesn't have time to dry out, you're going to have a lot of fungal issues and things. So try your best as possible. Sometimes you just have to water everything. That's fine, but when impossible, try to water the soil when you can. Adding compost and compost teas, just building up the beneficial bacteria in your soil and the beneficial biology. That's like a probiotic. Not only is it going to keep your plants super healthy, but it's also things like compost tea is going to you're going to spread a lot of beneficial bacteria and funguses and stuff. That's actually going to it's going to compete against bad diseases and things like that. So just building, adding compost, every year, tilling it in, top dressing it, and then when possible, spraying compost tea. You usually don't need to do compost tea every year for the soil. Once you do it once, it inoculates it. But it's a good idea to spray the actual plant parts, because then you'll spray a probiotic all over those plant parts. And then ensure drainage. So yeah, definitely just like bad drainage. If you just have bad drainage, you're going to have, the water doesn't flood. If you're digging in the ground and it floods, you're just going to have a lot of unhealthy plants, and that's going to attract a lot of bad things. Especially if you have soil that doesn't, drain very well, you're going to have a lot of anaerobic environments. That's like environments that don't have oxygen, and that's where a lot of pathogens will brew in those environments. So if you don't have good drainage in your soil, think about building up raised beds. You could build them with wood, or just just adding enough soil so your actual beds are just raise them up a foot. You don't need to actually build wood structures, but wood structures will help out, and they will make a lot. Getting your garden off the ground and high up in the air, where you don't have to worry about raising it up into raised beds or whatever, is just getting it at least a foot off the ground is going to help a lot with bad drainage and things like that. And then just choosing the right variety varieties, the right seasons, crop rotation, moving your plants around, so you're not over depleting the soil, and you're confusing different pests that try to deposit their eggs as a spot that they think the tomatoes are going to grow every year. And just planting like polycultures, trying to incorporate a lot of flowers and a lot of herbs. At least a quarter of your garden should be flowers and herbs, and that's going to really attract a lot of beneficial insects and build an ecosystem that's going to manage and eat up a lot of your pests. Circulation, trying to proper spacing, thin things out, get things off the ground, with trellises, and then prune them, like your indeterminate tomatoes. We'll talk more about like pruning later, but yeah, just pruning them up so we get sunlight and air flow into these plants. So it's going to dry up a lot of fungal issues, and it's going to make healthier plants. Mulching is really important because there's a lot of diseases in our soils, especially with tomatoes. And when it rains, it will splatter those diseases all over your plants, and then you get so just having a thick layer of mulch, that's going to help with that. It's also going to keep there's a lot of things like calcium deficiencies, like plants have trouble picking up calcium when there's erratic moisture levels. So having mulch on your garden, not only is that going to reduce the amount of time that you have to actually water, but it's also going to keep water consistent, which allows your plants to pull up nutrients like calcium and avoid different kinds of calcium deficiencies. And just spending, twice a week walking around your garden, looking on bug control, doing some squishing, looking for, disease things and cutting those disease plant parts out, and throwing them in the trash as quickly as possible. Sanitation, dead things, disease things that are struggling, get those out of your garden before they become these vectors for diseases. Remove, like fruits that fall, they're going to rot and they're going to attract insects and things. So just keeping your garden, healthy and clean. And also making like a log, so if you have issues, with certain diseases and plants and stuff, making a log so you can review that. And you're like, well, I know I had, some rust issues or some, mold issues. So I'm going to try to find plants that have disease resistance to those issues. Or, I know I had a bad pest issues. So maybe I'm going to come up with a plan to try to, deal with those pests, maybe, rotating my crops or doing pest covers or things like that. And so the final thing is like row covers. So these things, I don't recommend using row covers right off the bat. You kind of want to, garden, if you're a new gardener, you can see what kind of pests show up, and then that can kind of dictate, if you're going to use, row covers or not, in future years. But a lot of these row covers, they're really great. I mean, they're a lot of them are called pest covers. There's different grades. They're either called Remay or Agribon are like the two companies that produce it. And they have, thick covers that you can use for winter to grow winter crops. And then they have really light covers that allow more sunlight through, allow more, it doesn't like you trap much heat. And that's what you really want to use throughout the year as pest covers. And you can do, there's two different kinds of pest covers. There's like, a floating cover, which is basically like you plant a bunch of seeds or seedlings in a really small, and you just want to keep, from like, like you want to keep maybe like the white flies. Like let's say you're planting a bunch of like, cabbages or kales or collards or things, brassicas, and you just want to, during the spring, when you start noticing some of these the cabbage looper white flies, maybe we'll throw a row cover over it, you'll weigh it down with some rocks. And then once they get established, you can take that off because hopefully the flies are gone. And but then if you want to, give it continual coverage, you can actually do what's called a low tunnel, which we have a whole carpentry class where we'll talk about how to build these low tunnels, but you make these little hoops, and then you could throw the cover over the hoops, and that will give a lot of space for where you can have tall plants start growing like tomatoes and things where they can stay protected. But the idea is you want to think about what you're putting in there. Like if there's certain things that need to be pollinated, you got to remember, like not only pests can't get in there, but also pollinators can't get in there. So you might want to, when the blossoms open up, you might want to open this up, allow bees and stuff to come in to pollinate, or if you want to hand pollinate, or you just want to plant things that can, don't need to be cross-pollinated, can just pollinate themselves. Then we talked a lot about crop rotation already in a lot of classes, so I won't talk too much about it. The general idea is that just don't plant the same crops in the same place every year, because one is going to deplete the soil because each plant pulls up specific nutrients, and two, like pests are going to learn. They're going to be like, well, I see a tomato in that spot all the time, so I'm going to come back there every year for tomatoes. So you want try to move. Ideally, you want to do a 4-year cycle, because that way, like different tomato diseases that survive in soil, they'll die after about 4 years, in theory. But most people can't do that. I mean, like if you just have like a raised bed or something, I mean, mainly you're just going back and forth. Maybe divide. If you just have a raised bed, maybe divide it into 2 sections and just move them back and forth. And try. I mean, you do what you can. It's like it's not a perfect process, but ideally, just try to plant different plants in different areas, and try to have a legume area. Legumes are nitrogen fixers. So they suck nitrogen from the air and deposit it into the ground. So like peas and beans and like a winter cover crop like a white clover. So just designate like one section of your garden and plant peas in the spring, beans in the summer. Some people can get away with a fall pea crop, but most times they just grow their beans until frost comes, and then they replace that with white clover over the winter. And then what that's going to do is that's actually going to add nitrogen to that one spot, and it's actually going to refertilize that spot. And then you move that spot in a different part of your garden every year, and that's going to refertilize your garden, every year. So it's good to have just one section of like nitrogen fixers. So we have a couple questions. I had row cover one year, but I had a hard time keeping the cover on in the wind. How do you folks attach the cover to the hoops? Yeah, we'll have a whole class that talks about that. Basically, like I try to have one static side where I'll install, like landscape staples and really tightly secure that side. They even make clamps, you can buy from like Johnny Seed Select that will clamp on, that will clamp the cloth to like the hoops. And then I have one side that's like that I allow to open up on the south side. So in that it's more about weighing things down, and it's kind of like temporary. The idea is that you want to have one side that never like moves. And you can secure it, and that's going to be your secure side, and then the other side is just kind of weighed down by rocks and stuff, so it may pop up, but you got to get in there, so you don't want to take the whole thing off every time you want to water. But yeah, like we'll talk a lot about hoop houses and stuff, or low tunnels in the carpentry course. Are potatoes legumes? I don't think so. Or actually, they are on this thing. No, that's weird. Potatoes are nightshades. Yeah, I need to fix this. Yeah, okay. Thanks for pointing that out. I'm gonna make a note. I'm gonna try to fix this graphic. So, yeah, potatoes are they're in the same family with tomatoes and peppers and stuff. So, yeah, let me make a note really quickly to fix that slide. And then the last one, if you had a raised bed, can you just mix the dirt each year in the winter time as opposed to crop rotation? I guess you can mix it all up, and when you like compost it, and when you add compost and till it up, I mean, you are kind of mixing up. I mean, I guess that could help a little bit. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure. Yeah. I just don't know how much you're going to actually. If you do containers, that helps out a lot. But raised beds, it's just going to be hard to. But I guess yeah, if you want to mix it really well, that could definitely work. I believe. But it's going to be a lot of work. Yeah. And then like it still might not throw off the pests every year. So I mean, yeah. So it may help with the nutrient deficiencies, but the pests might still, they may still remember like there's certain crops in a certain area. Okay, I'm gonna just making a note. Potato. All right. Yeah, so and it's a good idea to keep all your crops when possible. You can't, all these things are suggestions. You can't do this, all the time, but when possible, try to keep your crops in the same family in the same spot, and then move that spot around. And particularly, like I think it's really important with brassicas. Brassicas are kind of hard to grow in this area. They're cool weather spring and fall crops, mainly because of pests like the cabbage loopers and the harlequin beetles will attack them. But it's if you you spread it, if you have brassicas, just like growing, like sporadically all throughout your garden, it's going to be a lot of work, managing the pests. But if you keep them all in one little area, and then just check them, twice a week for pests, I mean, that's a really easy way to kind of control them. And then just move that whole, every year, move the brassicas into a different spot. But yeah, that works with a lot. Yeah, and then again, yeah, you're right. Nightshade, potatoes are nightshade families. It works well to just kind of keep these in different families when possible. Like I said, there's at a certain point, you're going to mix a lot of these up, and that's fine. But I think the brassicas is probably the biggest. It's the most beneficial to keep them in one spot. And there's certain plants that do actually deter insects. Alliums like chives and garlics will if you plant, especially garlic. Garlic has a weird grow season. You plant garlic in like October. It might sprout over the winter, or it might just sit in the ground and then sprout in the spring, and then you harvest it, at the end of June. And it's just like this weird moment where you're like, all right, now it's July, and I have to like put some, random thing in there. So that's why a lot of times I'll put garlic as borders. I'll just plant them around the borders, so it's not this weird thing. I don't have like a big open spot of garden that I need to figure out how to plant, in the middle of July, which is an awkward time to plant things. I'll make borders of garlic, and that's convenient for spacing, but it's also good because it keeps away different nematodes. Like there's beneficial nematodes, there's good and bad nematodes. Nematodes are these like little biology worms that will eat, but some of them are bad. Some of them eat roots. Planting a border of chives and garlic will keep nematodes out, and different aphids don't like that strong smell. And nasturtiums are good for like codling moth, which is a big thing for fruit trees, white flies and borders and stuff. And you can actually eat nasturtiums too. It's a really delicious, spicy kind of salad. Tansies are good for like Japanese beetles. So there's a whole list of different plants that you can use to kind of repel different plants. And we're going to talk more about this in the mammal class. These are really beneficial, like Okay, so nectar sources. So again, we want to think about planting at least a quarter of your garden should be flowers and herbs. So different, particularly native flowers and native flowers if possible, and then like herbs. Like I really like perennial herbs like lavender and sage and things that just constantly produce. But there's a lot of great annual herbs like dill and basil. A lot of times, usually when they flower, they start getting a little bitter. And people rip them off. But I recommend kind of leaving there, like the flowers, like especially basil flowers. Like once they do flower, you can cut them off and try to prevent them from flower, so you can keep on harvesting the basil. But eventually, it's going to flower, and just let it flower because it's going to supply a lot of great nectar for a lot of native plants, bugs and beneficials and things like that. Um, so. Yeah, definitely. Here's some really great examples of different families and different herbs that you can use for the. And it's just like we want to get away from these monoculture systems where we just have, where the right kind of pest can just, or disease can just devastate these whole entire systems when it's just planted with nothing but single crop monoculture. But when you start planting, a lot of people are starting to learn now. A lot of these farmers is like every couple rows I plant a row of native flowers and native herbs. I want to have such healthier gardens and a nice ecosystem. All right, so beneficial bugs. So these are the kind of more the fun stuff. So we're going to talk about the good bugs. So it's really important to understand like which bugs are good and make sure not to squish these bugs. The easiest one to identify is the ladybug. They're real easy. Everyone knows what a ladybug. Well, they know what adult ladybug looks like, but a lot of people don't know what their full life cycle and the larva. And that's really like when it's in that larva thing, that wicked looking guy. That guy is just an aphid destroyer. He'll just eat so many aphids. He's just gathering energy before he pupates into a adult form. So definitely keep an eye out for any form of ladybug. As and also like aphid midges, you know. So if you see like a bunch of aphids and you see a really long looking thing that's eating the aphids, you know, keep that there. Hoverflies, they're real tiny. You won't probably see them, but a lot of flies are very beneficial. So just yeah, leave those flies there alone. And then there's like general killers. So you have to be a little careful with these things. Like some of them just like kill everything, good and bad bugs. But in general, they kill mostly bad things. Like a perfect example is like praying mantis. So it's really important. I'm going to show you a slide, the next slide about, so a lot of praying mantises, there's a lot of invasive praying mantis. There's only one that's considered somewhat native. It's the Carolina one. It's a brown looking, you know, mantis, and it has a special egg sac that's more longer. It's less like a big pouch. So if you see these guys, great. I mean, they'll destroy. You know, they'll just, you know, they eat everything. But I mean, they'll eat a lot of like bad bugs. So they're great. I'll show you some invasive ones in a second that you want to look out for. Assassin bugs. If you do get some of these assassin bugs, oh, just a second. I'm trying to. Okay, let me see if I can go. Okay, gotcha. Thanks. So if you do see some of these assassin bugs, yeah, leave them alone. I mean, they look pretty wicked. Some of them are crazy. This is one that is not in this area, but he like he or whatever the bug will he'll suck the insides of all these bugs, and he'll make like a camouflage out of the carcasses and stuff. It's crazy. But they're really great bugs that, for eating bad insects. Same with damsel bug is another great one. Tachnid flies are great. This one, lacewings. This is probably one of the best, you know, beneficial insect out there. It's really fantastic. You'll see them. They'll have these little eggs that are just hanging from. Yeah. Oh, here. Hold on a second. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. I'm back. Lace wings are fantastic. They have these little eggs that are hanging. That if you ever see that, you know, keep those eggs there. They're you know, there'll be these little lacewing flies, and the flies they don't have mouths. They don't really eat insects, but their larvae. Again, it's very similar to like the ladybug larvae. They just like devastate bad bugs, especially like cabbage loopers and things like that. So if you do have lacewings, yeah, definitely keep, you know, take care of them. A lot of there's a lot of like greenhouse growers. They'll this is like they'll order. There's a whole industry of like selling beneficial insects like ladybugs and lacewings, but greenhouse growers, definitely like a lot of marijuana growers and stuff like that will order these lacewings and let them go in their greenhouses, and like they do a great job eating up bad insects. So question as a tip, if you want to use okay, good to know. So I'll disable Wi-Fi. Okay. So I ordered a praying mantis from Amazon for my garden. Was that a bad idea? Just check out the praying mantis and see. Here I'll show you. Because you likely ordered their eggs. A lot of people, yeah, a lot of people claim that it's this native egg sac that you order, but in reality, they sell. There's a lot of Asian ones that they sell, the Chinese ones. So like if it comes in these big bulbs or if there's different colors and stuff, so you just really want to kind of like yeah, do a little investigation when it does arrive. Try to see if you can identify it as the Carolina one. If it's any other ones, I would definitely throw those away. They're wrecking havoc. Even some, you can actually Google this. It's crazy. There's a certain the Asian praying mantises will actually hang out at hummingbird feeders and will actually eat hummingbirds. It's pretty crazy. You can like yeah you could Google that. This is an actual picture of a praying mantis eating a hummingbird. So they do wreak some pretty bad damage. So we want to be careful not to order or manage these guys. So if you do find like one of these little like crystallized sacs, they're usually on woody plants like trees and berry bushes and stuff. If you do want, try to identify it. I'll show you University of Maryland has this plant in ID place that you could send pictures to, and they'll let you know if it's invasive, and if it is, you want to definitely get rid of it. Okay. And then wasps. So there's a lot of great predatory wasps out there, especially like for tomato hornworms. That's usually when you see them. These are not like the big wasps that are going to sting people. These are very small. Yeah, you won't ever see them. They're super small. And like what happens is they'll actually lay their eggs into these worms. And this is actually like where that scene, that famous scene in Alien, where that alien pops out of that guy's stomach during the lunch scene. And that the inspiration came from this. Um, so yeah, so if you see that, you definitely want to just leave them alone. That guy's definitely a goner, and then a bunch of different parasitic wasps are going to come out of him eventually. Ground beetles are fantastic. If you see big black beetles, leave them alone. Not to be confused with like Japanese beetles or things like that, but definitely they'll eat all kinds of things. They love having like permanent places to hide, like big rock features and stuff like that in your garden. And then there's a lot of other beneficial insects. You got a lot of people are mixing chickens. They'll let their chicken, if you're raising chickens, they'll let chickens run around their garden, and they'll eat up any like bad insects, or they eat up any insects they find. Birds. Centipedes and millipedes are fantastic. Spiders, even though everyone's like, a lot of people are afraid of spiders, you definitely don't want to kill spiders. Particularly like they're big eaters of mosquitoes, like especially since we have like those invasive tiger mosquitoes are just so awful. So they'll eat a lot of mosquitoes, but also a lot of other bugs. Dragonflies are really fantastic, and bats too are really great at controlling some insects. All right, so garden diseases. So moving along. So we're going to talk about some simple diseases, and then and some really bad ones. So really, what the first couple of them are going to be, not that big of a deal. A lot of this, can be handled with like just simple sanitation, like increasing circulation, pruning your tomatoes, getting things off the ground, trellising, watering the soil, not your plants, things like that. So like powdery mildew is a great example. So this you'll see white spots all over your leaf. It's just it's just a fungal disease. It usually doesn't kill the plant. It may like hurt the plant a little bit, may stunt some growth, but it's usually not something to really worry about. Again, like the best thing you can do is just get that plant off the ground, maybe prune it a little bit, get some more air, light, and circulation into it and sunlight, and that should, dry it up. Then you have powdery mildew, which is kind of a different version, or downy mildew. This you find more on the bottom of the leaves, and this is more of a darker fungal issue. And those, it could be a little bit more harmful. If you don't do anything, they could really hurt the plant. So when you do find that stuff, you just want to you want to just cut that piece, that infected area out, and just throw it in the trash if you don't have a really good compost system. And then leaf spots. This is a common thing you see all over, especially if you're growing lettuces and stuff, like chards and greens. You're going to find lots of spots. A lot of times they're just like simple bacterial things. It's not anything that's harmful. It's not going to hurt you. You can still eat most of these leaves. You can still, it's not something you really want to, you don't have to deal with it. I mean, if it starts to get, too bad and starts hurting the plant, you can start removing the spot, the infected areas. For the most part, though, I mean, you'll see this in your garden every year, and it's not that big of a deal. And then early blight. So early blight is another thing. I mean, if you're growing tomatoes, you have early blight. It's almost in almost everyone's soil. It's basically the bottom. If you've ever grown a tomato, the bottom branches of that tomato always gets yellow, and that's like an early blight. It's a fungal disease. You can leave it there. It usually doesn't do that much damage, but typically I would recommend when you see that, just kind of pull those branches off and throw them in the trash. Definitely with tomato diseases, you want to throw them in the trash because they survive. They're soil borne. They can survive in the soil really well. So if you compost them and you don't get proper temperatures, you're going to be spreading that throughout your garden. So tomato diseases, go ahead and throw them out. But yeah. But late blight. So now we're going to talk about some kind of getting into the diseases that are a little bit more serious. Definitely, like late blight is a very serious disease for tomatoes. It's very contagious. If you do find signs of it, you'll see a lot of there'll be whole areas of the branch. So it's not so the bottom branches. If the bottom branches get yellow, that's early blight, not the big deal. If the top branches start getting mold, getting brown and disease like, then you want to go ahead and definitely get rid of that tomato. This is a very contagious. It will kill your plant and it will spread around. This is what started the Irish potato famine, because in Ireland back in the day they were just growing one potato type of potato, and then very monocultural system, and then this disease came about and just wiped out all the potatoes. So it's a nightshade disease. So definitely remove that. If you do think you have that, you could check. With Maryland University, I'll show you a slide on how to check that if you want to confirm. But if you do have that, you want to remove that tomato as soon as possible and throw it in the trash. All right, so next one is chickens in the garden. Aside from caretaking burdens, are there downsides to keeping chickens in the garden? Do they eat certain plants? Are they big grass eaters? No, I mean chickens mainly eat insects and protein, and then you'll supplement them with grains and stuff like that. They usually don't eat grass. They typically don't eat much in your garden. They're running around your garden looking for pests. They're looking for protein. I've house sat with chickens before. I've never really raised chickens, but we're actually going to have another series this summer of webinars, and I believe someone's going to be doing a chicken webinar if you're interested in raising chickens. Chickens are legal, not roosters, but chickens, but they have to, you have to work with DOH, and I believe there has to be some kind of educational component or something like that. So, but yeah, we'll have a whole class on that later. How do you stop squirrels from digging up your pots on deck? So annoying. Yeah, so we'll have a whole class. I believe that's the next class is all going to be about mammals, and there's a lot of different things that you can do with squirrels, for sure. But I'm going to save that question for next class, just because that's a big one, and we could spend the next half an hour talking about squirrels. So another one is tobacco mosaic virus. So this one is pretty lethal for your tomatoes. It's pretty, if you see these like crazy looking patterns on your tomato, you want to go ahead and get rid of that tomato as quickly as possible. And this is one of the reasons why you should never smoke, cigarettes around your tomato plants, because a lot of these viruses they start out, or they'll start in tobacco. And then they survive the whole tobacco processing point, and they're literally like it's still a live virus as people are smoking it. And you can, if someone smokes a cigarette and then gets that virus on their fingers and then touches your tomato, that tomato is going to have that virus, and that's actually happened. That's a common way this disease is transmitted to tomatoes. So definitely, if you're a cigarette smoker or you have some people that smoke cigarettes in your house, have them wash your hands before they come into your garden. And for cerium welts, this is so a lot of these like blights and wilts with tomatoes, they're kind of hard to identify. A lot of times though, the best way to identify them is you have a tomato that all of a sudden just dies in the summer. that's a good idea. It probably has like one of these wilts or blights, and then you want to rip up that tomato, throw it away. Do not compost it. But if you have, but if your tomato suddenly dies in the fall when it's supposed to, then that's fine. You can probably compost that. So I mean, that's the biggest thing with these wilts. There are a lot of fungal issues. They're harder to fight. But basically, like if you have a tomato that dies in the middle of the summer, it's probably got a disease. You want to throw that tomato away and maybe plant a new tomato next year in a different spot. Same with anthracnose. And this is a disease. It's a big umbrella disease. There's a lot of different types of it, and it attacks a lot of mainly trees, but it does attack nightshade family, like eggplant, peppers, and potatoes and tomatoes. So again, if you start seeing different bad spots, again, this is one of those diseases where it's going to kill your plant quickly. So again, if you have a tomato plant dies in the middle of the summer, it's probably anthracnose, late blight or some kind of wilt. So just throw that tomato away and don't plant another tomato in that spot for a couple of years. And then the bacterial wilt, which we talked about with these, that comes with these, it hangs out in the insides of the cucumber beetle. This is, so that if they infect your cucumber plant, that cucumber is probably going to die. There's not much you can do. One way you can tell if it is if you snap a branch off and the insides, if it gets if it's gooey, slimy, it's got this bacterial wilt. But the best part, I mean, this is more of a prevention thing. You just got to catch these cucumber beetles early. Or if you have a problem with cucumber beetles, you might want to, get some pest cover and cover your cucumbers for a while, until they get big enough throughout the season. And then you get nutritional deficiencies. So there's, there's a lot. There's going to be a lot of problems, especially with chlorosis. That's when a certain part of your plant that's supposed to be green suddenly yellows. It could be a lot of different things, and some people are into it. They love investigating. Other people are just like, I don't have the time. I can't. So we'll talk about some general things you could do. But if you want to start investigating it, here's a list of causes to kind of go through. So if you always suddenly have a big part of your plant that turns yellow, then the first thing you want to look at is like, did someone compact that soil around there? That's a common thing if you have people running through your garden. If you keep on stepping on your garden bed, you're going to compact that soil, and that's going to really hurt your plant, and part of it's going to turn yellow. So that's a very common one. Another one is like damaged roots and stuff. That if there's something that happened, like a kid just dug up a plant or something. Check that out. Like pH. If you haven't done a pH test, you might want to you can get these little pH tests at Home Depot, and you can see if it's too acidic or it's too alkaline. It can turn yellow. Pathogens, pests, contaminations, things like that. And then you have like possible nutrient deficiencies, which is a whole nother category. You see if it's like iron. If it's like new growth that turns yellow, it could be the iron deficiency. If it's old growth that turns yellow, it could be like a nitrogen deficiency. So there's a lot, a lot of this stuff just overwhelms me. So I'm going to show you just like this general awesome fertilizer I use when I don't want to specifically try to target, what deficiency is happening. But there's a couple clues, like, nitrogen, deficiency if the bottom branches are yellow. If they turn like purple, it might be a phosphorus deficiency. You can buy different amendments like bone meal and rock phosphorus. Or if it's potassium deficiency, you could buy like kelp meal and stuff, or wood ash from your fireplace if you're not using any kind of like lighter fluids or things like that. So yeah, again, there's just a lot of different deficiencies that cause a lot of different things. I just don't have the patience and time to try to figure out all this stuff and investigate it. I think some people love it and some people don't. For me, I found this really great general fertilizer that I use. It's a low fertilizer, because you want to be really careful not to over fertilize things, because that's going to create weak plants. Like the Miracle Grow has too much nitrogen. It's going to create bad growth, and that's going to be a vector for it's going to attract diseases and pests. So it has a low fertilization. The NPK numbers are usually listed, and you want things below like 10 at the or even below like 5 at the most. You want low fertilizers. And then fish is your macronutrient that has liquid fish has nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. And then the seaweed is your micronutrients. So that has all these calciums and stuff, and then magnesium and things. So it's just a great overall. Like something's wrong, I don't know what it is. I'm just gonna you put a cap full into a watering can and then water your garden, and it's a great fertilizer. I probably fertilize like once a season. You don't want to over fertilize because a lot of fertilizers have salts, and if you over fertilize, the salts will start accumulating, and that can be harmful for plants. But at the most, maybe fertilize once a month. But I would recommend fertilizing once a season. Like I'll first fertilize for spring plants once, and for summer plants, and maybe like some fall plants. But again, you want to be careful not to over fertilize. You want to lean more heavy on things like compost. These natural organic matter that's going to slowly leach out fertilize, and then less on these liquid fertilizers that a lot of it can wash away or can bring some salts and stuff. Are eggshells beneficial to gardens? For sure, eggshells are amazing source of potassium. We're going to talk about actually blossom end rots in a second. I'll talk more about potassium a little bit more. Um, so I think that might be, yeah, that's the next slide. So blossom end rods. If anyone's ever had this, it looks like a disease, but it's actually a calcium deficiency that rots the end of your tomatoes and squashes and stuff. And it's a lot to do with just like your plant can't get calcium. And a lot of times you have plenty of calcium in your soil. It's just certain conditions are preventing it from sucking up that calcium. Again, like a very inconsistent water moisture level, like if it rains a lot and dries a lot, that really messes with plants' abilities to suck up calcium, or like just having if you're off on pH levels and things like that, that can hurt. One of the best things you could do with this for prevention is mulch your garden. Keep a nice layer of mulch, and that's going to keep a consistent moisture level. That's going to allow plants to soak up calcium better. Avoid high fertilizers. That makes it again that just like that Miracle-Gro stuff just produces a lot of unhealthy growth, and it's hard. It can actually prevent calcium absorption. And then but then the treatments and stuff, like if you have this and you're like, great, I'm going to mulch it, but that's going to take a while for that to bounce back, so you can actually inject calcium. Eggshells are really great. If you want a really quick injection of calcium, you can get some eggshells, steep them in a cup of water overnight, just let them sit, and then spray that or just throw that in the watering can, and then water your garden, and that's going to be a quick injection. But a lot of times, just like save your eggshells. I'll compost them, but they usually take a lot. They don't break down completely in compost, but they'll break down enough where they're and then it's okay to kind of bury eggshells into your garden, and that's going to be that's going to leach calcium into your garden. So definitely, like, all your eggshells, save those, crush them up really well, either compost them first, or just mix them straight into your soil, and that's going to add a lot of great calcium. Okay, let's see if I have one more question. I save it. Or cool, yeah. And then some prevention. Again, we talked about all this stuff already, but this is, all these things. Holistic health will help, keep diseases away. Having a lot of beneficial bacteria, having circulation, having sunlight in your garden, it's going to really, particularly, keep, fungal issues at bay, but also can help, build immunities to more bacterial and viral issues as well. Again, crop rotations, polycultures, diversity of plants. If you got, know you got hit by certain diseases, one year, look for disease resistant plants, a lot of hybrids. Hybrids are a lot of times they create these hybrids. These are new types of plants that they breed specifically for disease issues to make them more disease resistant. So definitely check that out. Garden sanitation is a big one. Just like when you had disease things in your garden, cut those out, remove those, dispose of any infected materials, and then a lot of times if you're like pruning a lot of disease stuff out, you want to kind of sanitize your pruners too. Like if you're cutting out most of this stuff, like tomatoes, you can just pull those off, pluck them off with your hand. But if you're cutting disease things with your hand pruners, you want to disinfect the hand pruners afterwards, so you're not, because you could be, spreading that disease around your garden. Let's see. Oh, mycorrhizae. We talked a lot about mycorrhizae already. It's this really great beneficial fungus that attaches in the tree roots. Trees, they sequester carbon, and they use a lot of that carbon to build, their branches and stuff. But then the leftover carbon, they convert into sugars and carbs and stuff, and they exude them. They leach them out slowly out of their root systems, and that feeds all this like healthy biology in the soil. That's why perennial plants, mixing in, long-term perennial plants really helps feed, like, they exude a lot more nutrients, or exudites, they're called. They have a lot more exudites in the soil. So having more perennials will actually feed and build healthier biology in your soil. But having mycorrhizae, it's a symbiotic relationship where there's this fungus that they'll attach onto these roots and they'll feed off those exudites, but then they'll extend another 10, 15 feet and they'll grab additional nutrients and water and bring that and feed the tree in return. And a lot of times when you have multiple different plants, they'll attach onto multiple plants, and then they'll send the nutrients and the water to the plants that need it the most. It's a really, really amazing kind of process. And you can buy powder stuff to mix in your garden. A lot of times though, if you go to like a Rock Creek Park or some healthy place, you're not supposed to do this, but if you just grab like a small little, cup full of soil by like a really healthy tree, you'll have some really beneficial mycorrhizae in there. There's a question. What is a good way to disinfect your tools? Rubbing alcohol? Yeah, like rubbing out. I mean, I use hand sanitizer. It's kind of hard to come by right now, but normally, something with a 90% alcohol, or some kind of like high bleach, bleach solution or something like that. But yeah, I'll use hand sanitizer. Like I keep a bottle of hand sanitizer in my pruning equipment, and anytime I cut out any disease thing, I'll just squirt a little bit on the blade. Do mycorrhizae work in gardens without trees? Yeah, for sure. So mycorrhizae, more perennial woody things have better relationships with fungus. In annual vegetable gardens are more, they like more bacterial. But at the same time, mycorrhizae will attach and will help and benefit anything in your garden. It's a great thing to include into your soil, regardless of and a lot of your soil already has this stuff too. If you have really bad soil, maybe you want to think about inoculating it. But if you've got healthy soil that's already growing things, chances are it probably already has this stuff in there. And then pruning. So we talked a lot about pruning, but I'll give you a real quick review. If you have tomatoes, tomatoes will just grow along the ground and just get big and bushy, and they'll get all kinds of diseases and stuff. So the idea is to get it off the ground, trellis it. These are for indeterminate tomatoes. Determinate tomatoes are more like the Romas and Ruggers, like the 4-foot tall bushes that you don't need to trellis. They produce all their fruit at once, and that's why there's too many tomatoes to deal with, so a lot of people will can them and preserve them and stuff, make sauces. But the indeterminate tomatoes are tomatoes that will just keep on growing forever, and until a frost comes. I mean, they can get like 6 feet tall or at least. So what you want to do is you trellis these guys. The first branch that flowers, you want to pull off all the branches underneath it, because they're not going to produce fruit, and they're just going to hang and touch the soil, and then there'll be a vector for diseases to get on the plant. And then after that, when each little crotch angle, you want to go out there every day and look for suckers. These suckers grow in these little these 90-degree angles. You want all the branches on your tomato to be 90 degrees, essentially, give or take. And then you have these guys grow out in between, and that's where you want to really pluck these guys out. You can pluck them out. If you let them get too big, you'll have to cut them out, but you can pluck them out with your hands, and that's going to prevent your tomato from just becoming this giant ball of foliage that's just going to have all kinds of fungal issues and stuff, and it's not going to produce great fruit. So just by opening it up and allowing sunlight to get in, you're going to have better fruit and less disease issues. And then trellises. So we talked a lot already about trellises, but definitely try to get everything you can off the ground. These things will grow on their own, like peas and beans. You just plant them next to a trellis, and they'll grow up, and they'll start. They do these circles until they can grab onto something, and then they'll start growing. But like tomatoes and certain kinds of squashes and pumpkins and stuff may need a little bit more help. So you can tie them. Just when you tie them to a trellis, don't tie them super tight, because that's going to, as they grow bigger, that's going to choke them. You want to have, some kind of spacing between that. So this question, does pruning lower leaves go for peppers too? They don't get as big, but they are nightshades. I don't really prune my peppers. I only prune tomatoes. I mean, if you're having issues with diseases and stuff, you might want to like prune off the bottom branches and try to get it, get it off the ground. But I've never actually pruned peppers ever. Fertilizers, again, get away from this inorganic fertilizer. It, Miracle-Gro and stuff, it creates bad, unhealthy growth. And a lot of it just washes away into our water systems and causes algae blooms and all kinds of bad, stuff. So try to do more organic, slow release stuff, compost, manure, compost and manure, fish fertilizer, seaweeds. If you need to add soil structure, vermiculite, perlite, things like that. So try to get as organic as possible, and you're looking for like slow release kind of fertilizers that are really going to prevent, are going to cause healthy growth. Which squash needs a trellis? So this is a squash trellis. Typically, you can actually buy like squash nettings, and you can create. This is the kind of trellis they like. I mean, you could do a lot of different creative trellises, and we have in there different classes. We I think our second class we have a lot of different slides on different kinds of trellises, but it's really up to you. I mean, most squash will just grow on the ground, but they'll take up a lot of space. Pumpkins and stuff could take up, like 20 feet. So that general idea is, again, like you can grow like summer squash though. You don't need trellises, like the crook necks and the yellow squash and zucchini. They're usually these like big bushes. They're more bush-like usually. But the winter squashes, like the pumpkins and gourds and things, it's a good idea to try to get them off the ground if you can. It's a little tricky. They get heavy. Sometimes you have to make little hammocks for the fruits, or like use pantyhose and stuff to kind of brace them. But if you can do that, it's great. It's definitely like it's not easy, trellising squash, but if you can get that off the ground, like like cucumbers, and definitely like love to be off the ground and things like that, and melons, you'll have healthier plants, and you'll just have a lot more room to grow. But it's a little tricky. Like the heavier and bigger plants are, it gets, and it's a lot harder than trellising the tomato. You need to build a decent, a strong structure. Thinning plants too, making sure you thin things out, have lots of room and space. You don't overcrowding things. It's going to cause more fungal issues and bad, unhealthy plants. And then like treatment sprays. So there's a couple of sprays that you can actually directly treat different issues. Again, like it's a good idea just to start out doing like general holistic health. But there's particular things that you have to deal with. There's some harsh organic sprays. I don't recommend just going out and using these things. These are all organic, approved sprays. But copper and like you got to wear face masks and stuff and protective gear. I mean, it's you need to know what you're doing. So you research it or hire someone to do it. Pyrethrine is pyrethrin. It's like it's this herb pesticide that's it's natural from chrysanthemums. It's in the flowers or something I think. But so it's all natural stuff. It's just yeah, I mean you need to know what you're doing. You can kill a lot of things with it. You just gotta be careful. But if you want like safer treatments, again, neem oil works really well. Root shield if you're dealing with some like root diseases like wilts and stuff, or are good sprays. And then a lot of DIY sprays that you can do, preventive sprays, like compost teas and mycorrhizae. That's going to help build the health of these plants, so they can, so they'll be able to, tolerate different kinds of fungal issues and bacteria a lot better. Compost teas, like you get some finished compost, you put it in like some pantyhose or cheesecloth in a bucket of water, get like a, $10 aquarium pump, let it bubble, add some like organic molasses, and then to bubble it for a couple, like a day or two, and then it's just going to be full of all this like healthy probiotic biology, and you just spray it on the soil, and you can spray it on the plants, and it just creates this like probiotic spray. Well, yeah, we'll have on our compost class. The question is, will you have a class on compost teas? In our compost class, we'll talk step by step on how to actually create some compost teas. But you can also use a compost tea to treat certain fungal issues like powdery mildew and things like that. It has, it's somewhat effective if it's not a bad case. You can make natural fungicides out of garlic and horsetail and things like that, and like baking soda sprays, are good for powdery mildew. Again, you just want to spray a little bit of something first if you're doing make your own spray, and just making sure that your plant's not going to react terribly to it before you spray the whole thing. But a lot of that spray, if you don't add some kind of like sticking substance to it, it's just going to wash right off. So I use Dr. Bronner's when I make my own sprays, and that it's an organic soap that helps all helps the spray actually stick to the plants. And soil solarization. So if you know, like, especially this is good for like tomatoes and stuff that that had really bad diseases, and it's still in the soil. You just in the middle of the summer, you put white plastic out on it and weigh it down for a couple months, and that's just going to bake your soil, and it's going to kill what's ever in there. And you could do like if you're doing container gardens, there's a really easy way to solarize. You could do that any time of the year. It's just you just put that soil in like a baking pan, put it in your oven, just cook it for a little while in your oven, and then that's going to kill any of the bad biology in there. But then you have to when you bring it back, you need to build back up the good biology. So you need to mix in some compost and compost teas and stuff to make sure it's still there. And so this is that institute I was telling you about, the Plant Diagnostic Laboratory. So if you're ever not sure, you're like, I'm not really sure if this is a good or bad, if this is early blight or late blight, or what kind of, I think you can also send them like bugs and stuff. They'll actually identify and help you, and they're really quick about it, and they'll help you identify certain things and let you know if that, yes, that is a bad thing that needs to leave your garden, or no, that's not that bad. So you're not on your own. You can definitely check them out. They can help you out. There's a lot more other plant ID apps and things, local and national ones that can help you identify things. All right, so last section that we're going to get into are the garden weeds. So we're going to talk about just some like common garden weeds that you have to deal with. Some of them aren't a big deal. A lot of them you can actually eat. Some of these garden weeds are actually the most healthiest things in your garden that you can grow. And then other things are pretty bad that you got to get rid of pretty quickly. So I'm just going to go through just basically just kind of show you pictures of different things. I don't have a whole lot to say about all these garden weeds, but the main thing is just to kind of be able to identify which ones are bad and good, and how to take them out. So this question, is the extension still open? Probably not. Yeah, I doubt that's an essential service, but you can always try. But yeah, you may have to wait till the pandemic's over before they're back open. So first one, dandelions. So you'll see these a lot in yards and things, and they'll definitely pop up. If you want to get rid of them, they have big tap roots. You definitely got to get in there, and I'll show you a tool you can use for dandelions. You want to get the entire tap root, or else it's just going to grow back. But at the same time, dandelions are very nutritious. I'm seeing this a lot in like Yes Market and Whole Foods. Actually, they'll sell dandelion bundles. It's like $5 for a little bundle. It's pricey, but you can actually get you can harvest them anywhere. I mean, I definitely recommend don't harvest them in a place where dogs could be, or any kind of contaminants. You want to make sure you got a nice clean source. I try to eat them before they flower. It's a pretty bitter leaf, but it gets a lot more bitter when it flowers. A lot of times people will pull them up. I think I saw, yeah. So this is the dandelion. This root area is very tender, and that's where a lot of people will like saute that area, and it's really good. Or they'll just eat the leaves, and I wouldn't have a whole dandelion salad, but you can mix it into like mixed greens and stuff, and it's pretty good. Thistle. Don't have a whole lot to say. I mean, it's pretty easy to identify, pretty easy to remove. You'll see those throughout the year. Chickweed. So this is it's a really easy one to deal with. It's another edible. A lot of people will make pestos out of this stuff. It's really nutritious, and it's just really easy. You can leave it there. It's not going to get too crazy, or it's very easy to pull. Horse nettle, definitely one of the more worse ones. They have like ribosins, ribosins. Like I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's like where the roots will actually expand on their own. They'll send runners and stuff. So it can spread pretty quickly. So when you see these guys, you want to get rid of them, but just be careful because they got a lot of thorns on the bottom. So it looks like a normal leaf, and then you grab it and you got thorns in your hand. So when you see these kind of horse nettles, try to wear a glove to pull them. And then in the fall, they're really easy to identify because they got these like yellow balls. Oh, so Maryland Ag was is an essential service. So yeah, that might still be open. No, they're not open. That's what someone says. I'm a Baltimore City Master Gardener. Extension offices are closed. Okay, so that's a bummer. But they'll open it back up soon. Poison ivy. So poison ivy is actually a native. It's not really considered a weed, but it's not something you really want to like have in your garden. So it's just good to always identify poison ivy. It's the leaves of three. I have this thing where I look at the bottom leaves, and they look like upside down mittens. Like that's where the thumb is for each mitten. So that helps me identify them. And a lot of times, though, the oils they have is more like a tar substance that stays for a long time. So that's why a lot of times you'll see the vines. If you see a vine with red hairs, don't pull that. Even if it's in the middle of winter, it may still have some of that tar, and you can still get poison ivy. If you ever do get poison ivy, don't take a hot shower, and that just opens up your pores and spreads it around. Take a cold shower. There's certain it's not like the tar it doesn't wash off with normal soap. You need like dishwasher soap or something like that, or they make special kind of poison ivy that bonds to it and takes it off, because it really is more like a tar than an oil. But it's a good thing to be able to identify and yeah, get rid of very carefully with gloves and trash bags and stuff. Pokeweed. So this will definitely, we'll definitely see this in your garden. It gets huge, so you want to pull it pretty quickly before it sucks up a lot of your nutrients. And every time we do like a plant walk, someone will say, "Oh, this is poisonous," and another person will say, "I grew up on eating pokeweed and drinking pokeweed wine." So it's just a mixture. I mean, a lot of parts. I mean, there's different levels of poison. I think like the roots, maybe the more poisonous part, and the berries are less poisonous, or something like that. But if you're going to eat any part of pokeweed, you need to do some thorough research, though. I would not recommend eating it, but people do, and they make wines and they saute the leaves and stuff. So you just want to be really careful with pokeweed. Um, and then then you got animal cool weather crops. So those were, I believe those were perennials that I was showing. So now we're going to show you cool weather things that are going to emerge first, and then warm weather plants. For the cool weather, the big one's dead nettle. So this is a common weed. It's not that big. It can take over a lot. Compete, especially with your yard, and it's actually really beautiful. I think when they take over whole fields and it's just like all purple. But you can dead giveaways and the purple on the top. Also the stems. It's in the mint family, so it has a square stem. And they are edible. You can eat the tops. I don't know a whole lot about how to, I've never actually done it, but I've heard from people that you can eat yeah, they are edible. But and then like stinging nettle and stuff, there's a lot of nettle families actually have a lot of antioxidants and are very high in vitamin C and stuff, and so a lot of people will make antioxidant teas and immune boosting teas out of different types of nettles as well. But they're pretty easy to control, pretty easy to pull. um, and then wild mustard, for sure, is got the yellow leaves on top. Yeah, I don't see this too often, but you do. Yeah, they will creep every once in a while into the garden. Wood sorrel is another one. It's like a clover. You can actually eat it. It's got this sour stuff. You don't want to eat too much of it because it's got that oxalic. I'm probably saying this wrong. Acid. So if you eat too much, you get a little upset stomach. But a lot of people will put it in water, and it'll just make it just adds some some sourness, or just chew on it throughout the day. It's really easy to deal with, and really easy to pull. Ground ivy, again, yeah, yeah, pretty easy to deal with. Square stems, yeah, will definitely will appear in your garden throughout the year. Bittercress, again, they're pretty easy to deal with. Just one, they just, I believe they shoot runners, but they'll have, they just have like these pods that are you pull. You just want to make sure you get all the roots to it, or you can, it will bounce back. Then these are some of your warm weather plants that you're more likely to see throughout the summer. Prickly lettuce is one of them. It's pretty easy to identify. You'll see that pop up a lot. Lamb's quarter. Lamb's quarter is a really another edible, really nutritious plant. It's not it's not very it's not very invasive. It doesn't compete that much. I usually when I see it, I just leave it alone, and I'll like harvest the leaves. It's kind of like a spinachy kind of you want to saute it, but it's delicious and it's really really nutritious. So definitely keep an eye out for lamb's quarter. Morning glory. So this is invasive. It's a bindweed, and unfortunately, people still love it because it blooms. How blooms in the morning, sometimes at night. Different kinds of these unique blooms, and it's a beautiful plant. But it is invasive. It will take over, and unfortunately, like nurseries are still selling them. You can still order morning glory seeds and buy morning glory seedlings, at nurseries. So definitely don't want to do that. You don't want to introduce these guys because they'll spread like crazy. And you definitely want to get rid of them if you do have them already. Same with like bindweed, it's part of the morning glory family. It's just these long weeds that like these vines that just like take over the area. Bermuda grass is the worst. So this is one of those really bad ones. So it spreads like through, like we said, rhizomes. And you have to remove any part of this plant. Like if you pull out like 90% of it, but you leave a little chunk of it, it will just restart all over again, and it'll spread like crazy. And it spreads through these like runners and stuff, and it can get pretty crazy pretty quickly. So some people, they try to pull it, but some people either need to spray it or smother it with like a cardboard, and you can like sheet mulch it, and try to smother it. But it's a tough one to get rid of. That and like sedges and stuff like that, nut sedges. Purslane. So this is a good one to know. Purslane actually has the highest level of omega-3 acids, fatty acids, in any plant that I know of. It's a really healthy plant. It does not get crazy into your garden. And people actually try to grow this weed. I think you can order Purslane seeds from certain seed companies nowadays. It's like a succulent. You can eat it fresh or you can cook it and things. It's a really healthy plant. That pops up throughout the summer. Crabgrass is another one. Got to make sure you get the whole bit. It'll shoot runners and it'll spread like crazy. Yeah, just try dig it out and get the whole bit of it. So broadleaf and narrowleaf plantains. So these guys, I mean, they're not, they don't get too crazy. They don't take over. They are a weed. But what's really cool about these plants, I always leave them around because if a mosquito bites you, which is going to be all summer long, you can actually make a salve out of one of the leaves where you just chew up the leaf a little bit, and then while it's like moist and chewed up, you put that on top of the mosquito bite, and I swear to you, it will take the itch away. It's so cool. So I definitely keep these guys around. I think there's a lot of medicinal purposes that you can do with these things. Most people don't eat them normally. It's more of like topical stuff, but I don't know a whole lot to it, but they're pretty amazing plants. This one's a bad one. Devil's weed, datura. It will look like kind of like an eggplant when it starts popping up. That's the first time I saw it. I thought it was just some eggplant volunteer, like some seed that we didn't, get rid of. But then the telltale sign, you'll see these spiky balls and these crazy flowers. This is a very poisonous plant, so you want to remove this plant as soon as possible. You don't want animals or anything, for some reason like a dog or something, eating it. But you definitely want to, and they get huge really quickly, so it will suck up a lot of nutrients. So you want to remove this guy as quickly as possible. So plantain looks like fleabane. Yeah, they're different plants. I don't know much about fleabane, but I know it's definitely a different plant than a plantain. Bermuda grass invaded my asparagus patch. Yeah, Bermuda grass is the worst. Once it invades, It's so hard to get rid of. And we even there was this garden that had this horrible patch, and we just couldn't pull it all. So we just we created this giant garden and landscape fabric to everything and put mulch on top to smother it, and it actually started growing in the mulch on top of the landscape fabric and just completely took over the whole garden. Yeah, Bermuda grass is the worst. That's why a lot of people will resort to herbicides with Bermuda grass, like different things like roundups and stuff like that. Again, you need to know what you're doing to apply it. You need to apply it to the cambium and to you make sure it apply it just to that, so it just takes it out. But yeah, Bermuda grass is really tough to get rid of. Ragweed, one of the things that tortures us with this pollen, but pretty easy to identify and to pull in the summer. Then here's a whole list of edible garden weeds. So I'm actually going to talk a lot more about this during our harvesting and cooking class. But yeah, there's some, all these weeds are super nutritious. They're probably got more nutrients than most of the things that we can plant, especially like purslane has amazing level of omega-3. Lamb's quarter has tons of iron and things like that. Yeah, they're really healthy plants. And yeah, I mean, chickweed makes a really delicious pesto. And things like that. So definitely, yeah, things to explore. But again, make sure you get this stuff where there's no dogs peeing on it or runoffs or things like that. You want to have clean sources for this stuff. Then prevention. So the last part of this class, we're going to just talk about ways to prevent weeds. We talked a lot already about mulch, but mulch does a lot of great things from just making sure you don't have to water every day. Like I water my garden twice a day, twice a week. It's because I mulch really heavily, and I don't have to worry about it drying out. But also it adds organic matter, and it also prevents. It's not it won't prevent all weeds. Some weed seeds will still get through there, but for the most part, it reduces my amount I have to weed by 90%. It's really effective. And you can use straw, shredded bark mulch is what I use. It works really well. Living mulches where you got clover that just grows in, and clover is pretty good. It won't compete with too many things. It will kind of compete. I'm having trouble with clover is kind of trying to fight to take over my strawberry patch, so I am having to weed the clover out of the strawberry patch. But for most part, it's a nitrogen fixer. It's not very competitive against bigger plants. Usually you want to establish the plants first and then seed in the clover. But you want to avoid things like hay, has seeds in it, wood chips. Wood chips are too much carbon, and it's breaking down. It will actually suck up the nitrogen from your garden to finish composting. We'll talk more about that in the composting class. But I use wood chips for paths, but I never put wood chips on top of a garden for it's just not bad for the mulch. And then the dye mulches should have toxic stuff. But you never want to put more than 2 or 3 inches of mulch, or it's going to prevent water from seeping in. Garden covers is another way if you don't want to weed a lot. They make this plastic garden cover that's made out of corn plastic that you just kind of pull over your garden and just puncture holes. It comes in these rolls. And that's really great. I would recommend and if you're going to do this stuff, you can still water in by hand, but drip irrigation works a lot better with this stuff, just to make sure, because this is water is not getting through this plastic. So you want to make sure they're getting enough water. And then when you're done at the end of the year, you mix it up into the soil and you let it, and it just breaks down over the winter and it becomes fertilizer for your soil. But then another alternative is landscape fabric. Landscape fabric allows water and stuff to get through, but if anyone's ever done landscape fabric, the weeds basically just fuse into that fabric, and it's so hard to pull up. So it's basically it's great if you know you're going to have a garden there, and you're going to have the same kind of design for your garden. It works well, but if you're going to be moving things around every year, I wouldn't recommend landscape fabric. It's so hard to just pull up and move around. There's a question. Is there going to be a class on irrigation? I've always wanted to install drip irrigation. We talked about drip irrigation. in our I think in our first class we had a section on it. But yeah, that's probably all we're going to get into on drip irrigation. What I recommend with drip irrigation, if you're into it, they make kits, so you don't have to like know everything right away. Just order a kit from like Dripworks or something like that. Just like a standard kit, it'll have everything you need in it, and then it comes with instructions, and then and you can watch YouTube videos and stuff. And it's just about like kind of like, you know, it's like Lego. It's just putting the pieces together. But yeah, it's really easy if you don't want to want to plan it all out right ahead of time and do all, you know, just order the kits, and they're pretty great. Josh, where can I get good quality clean straw? So straw is a little bit tough. Like I usually get my straw from like Home Depot. Um, but I know people used to have like straw. They used to buy a mass straw from like farms that they knew it was organic, and then they would have these like straw, um, whatever, like co-ops or whatever, where people would you know, buyers club straws. But and then the guy that did that isn't around anymore. Sometimes I'll get them from like construction sites, but you really want to make sure they're not being used to soak up, you know, bad toxic, you know, industrial runoff or anything like that. So you want to be careful when you get them from industrial sites. But yeah, just like garden centers and places like that is where I usually get them. Um, it says free straw at University of Maryland. You have to get 20 bales. Okay, cool, cool. So, yeah. So if you, Carol, if you want to give us a little bit more details on that, like who do we yeah, if you want to post in, like, who is there a contact or website for the free straw? So University of Maryland College Park. Okay. Um, so there's a couple questions. What is the tall grass like? 6 foot, and it keeps coming back. So wait, can you say it again? So which is the tall? Oh, the tall grass, like 6 feet, that keeps on coming back. I'm not really sure. If you want to send me a picture, I can help you identify that one. But yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, I know like broomcorn and stuff. I'm trying to think of things that actually get 6 feet tall that are grasses, and maybe like, but I'm not really. Yeah, I don't know. Send me a picture for sure. Hampton's Nursery in Hyattsville sometimes has straw, but not sure if they're open now. Okay. Um, So, Flora said, I got disconnected for a few. Are you sharing your screen, or is it over? Yeah, I'm sharing the screen right now. Are you not seeing the screen? The screen share is on. So let me, but yeah, if you can't see it, okay, let me try. I want to stop it real quick, and then I'm going to share it again, and maybe that will reset it for you. Okay, did that help at all? Okay, well, if you can't see it, it's definitely being recorded, and I will post these later. So if you can't, cool. So cover crop again. We talked a lot about cover crop already. For the sake of time, won't get too much into it. But like, if you have some, like, it's a good idea to always keep your soil covered. You know, you don't want your soil exposed, because you can get, you know, weed seeds, and also like runoffs, and it can erode your soil and kill your biology. But like a good, like if you just have a space you're not going to do anything with, buckwheat makes a really great summer crop. It grows really quickly. It will keep weeds out, and then it's also will attract a lot of beneficial insects. And over winter, you can do like winter rye and winter wheats. But if you're not into cover crops, just buy some mulch. Mulch, you know, you just want to protect your soil as much as possible. And then when you do winter cover crops, you know, in spring, like you do winter rye and wheats and stuff, there'll be like grass coming out. Just want to cut that down like maybe a month before you plant, let it kind of dry out a little bit, and mix it in, till it, and give it, you know, water it, give it, you know, a couple weeks to kind of break down to your soil. And if you do that, it's going to be like the most amazing soil ever. This is like better than any fertilizer that you can add to your garden. So definitely, yeah, check it out. It takes a little bit. I mean, cover crop is definitely not like a first year gardener thing, but when you're ready, like it's a really great way to like really make amazing soil. And then last part we're going to talk about like just the treatment of weeds. Again, like try at least twice a week. Go out there and spend 5-10 minutes just weeding your just weeding. At the same time, looking for bugs and squishing things and cutting diseased parts of plants out and stuff. So it's just a general sanitation that you want to do. Um, so okay, and then also when you weed, ideally you want to like grab all those weeds and throw them in your compost pile, or if your compost pile doesn't get hot enough, you want to just like throw them away. A lot of times though, I just kind of I leave them there. You can only do this if you weed on a dry day. If you weed on a wet day and you like pull the weeds and just leave them on the top of the surface, they may root themselves. But if it's like a dry day, I'll pull my weeds and I'll just kind of leave them on the ground, let them kind of like become a mulch and break down and just add nutrient. It's a whole nutrient cycle kind of thing. So, but I wouldn't do that with like rhizomes, like Bermuda grass and nut sedges. Do not do that. When you pull that stuff, you got to get it out, because any part you leave could very easily reroot itself, and then you got to deal with it all over again. So that really is, the rhizomes are kind of the hardest weeds to deal with, like the Bermuda grasses, nut sedges, things like that. So again, some people will sheet mulch and just smother them. Other people will try to solarize them with plastic, in the summer. And then like if you can't figure it out, yeah, herbicides like Roundup and things like that. But again, you either hire someone that knows what they're doing or spend some time researching. There's actually like to actually apply for herbicides commercially, you need to get all kinds of license and stuff. So it's a serious thing. There's some over-the-counter stuff that's not, but still you want to research what you're doing. And then just like making sure doing it often. Don't ever let your weeds get to seeds, because then at that point, you're going to have those weeds all over your garden. And then just like spending some time finding the right tools for you. So I'll show you the next slide. Uh, there's a lot of great tools, weeding tools out there. And the idea is you want to sometimes you have to get down on your knees and you have to get, use one of these like, hand weeders or hand hose, and that's fine. But for the most part, if you can, you want to be, if you want to save your back, you want to be standing up straight. And so you want to get a long, handle tool that's where you can actually stand up straight and still, especially if you got a long, I mean, and this is not a big deal if you got a raised bed, but if you got like a long bed or a huge area to weed, you're just going to destroy your back if you got like a hand tool or a short handle tool. So you want to get a long tool that allows you to stand up straight to actually weed. So a lot of these could be the stirrup hose. I really like this, the scuffle hoe. It's got blades on 3 different sides, and you just kind of scuffle it around your plants, and it will cut, and it's really easy to cut your weeds. So the stirrup, as opposed to stirrup hoe, it's just got this like one blade here, and you just kind of run this underneath the surface of the soil, and that like cuts all the weeds and stuff. If you have really long beds, like a farm, wheel hose work really well. It's just like a stirrup hoe, but it's got attached to a wheel, and you just like run it in between the beds, just to weed really quickly. There's a lot of different types of like, long hand holders. This is really important, the dandelion weeder. So anything that's got a deep taproot, these work really well. You can actually get in there and kind of pop up that taproot. Because if you leave a portion of that taproot in for things like dandelions and like crabgrasses and stuff, it will regrow back. So it's important to get that whole root. So this tool works really well. Um, yeah, so that's basically the class. So I'll stick around for a little bit. Sorry for all the bad internet connections and stuff. I think it seemed like it just stormed, so I think usually that messes with my internet. I'll try to figure out the landline by next class. But yeah, if you have any questions left over, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your questions, or type them in. I'm going through the chat box right now, trying to see if I didn't miss anything. But yeah, thank you all so much. Let's see, so this is probably Kevin Conover for the University of Maryland for the straw. Cool. Regarding my asparagus and the Bermuda grass, which has grown a year. So you want some, yeah. if it's growing through your asparagus, that's a little tough. Yeah, I mean, you could definitely save your asparagus. I mean, you can rip them out and stuff. I wonder about. I think like Roundup might work because Roundup is supposed to be for it's like a Monsanto product, so we don't want to use that stuff as when we often as we want we only if we have to. But I know it will a lot of times it will take out certain weeds and leave certain things. If you want to email me that, maybe send me a picture of your asparagus. I'll definitely do some research and try to get back to you with a good solution to that. All right. Well, cool. Well, thank you all so much. I'll stick around, like I said, for a couple minutes, but yeah, I'll definitely. I'll see you next week. Next Tuesday, most likely, it's going to be. We'll move the class back a couple hours in the day. I'll send an email out to give you a heads up, just because if we do go on the Kojo show or whatever, but if not, it'll be normal time. I'll send you an update. And yeah, thank you all so much. Appreciate it, and stay safe.